Quick question before we start. Have you ever sat in a one-to-one with your manager, started counting how many seconds you have been looking them in the eye, then realized you have lost track of what they were saying and everything you wanted to say? Yeah? Then you're in the right place. You're listening to the Spacious Brain podcast, where real neurodivergent humans with real jobs and real daily chaos overshare with pride. Minus the glossy, my ADHD is my superpower nonsense. Hi, I'm Noemi, a scientist, a neurodiversity coach. Yes, someone who will absolutely derail into a story from when I was 12 because I'm ADHD and tangents are my love language. If you ever felt alone or felt like the Temu version of neurodivergent because you're not an entrepreneur, not a CEO, and you forget to eat and drink on the same day, you're in the right place. Let's keep this real. In this episode, I'm joined by Emma. Emma spent around 15 years working in corporate operations, transformation, continuous improvement, and project management. Today, she works with leaders who perform at a high level while paying a considerable personal price for it. Emma received her ADHD diagnosis at 38 and is currently waiting for an autism assessment. Her diagnosis gave her language for experiences she had carried for decades, followed by the familiar cocktail of relief, grief, and wondering how everyone missed something that now seems so obvious. We talk about the structure that helped her thrive as a child, what happened when that structure disappeared at university, and how she learned to build a successful corporate career through pattern recognition, control, and masking. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And I will start with the usual question. Now, everybody knows that is the first question, and it's who is Emma?
Emma is someone who has a background in corporate, in operations and transformation. That's what I did for about 15 years, running various different operations teams and continuous improvement and project management. And Emma now works specifically with leaders who may or may not be neurodivergent, may or may not be diagnosed. But the thing they have in common is usually that performing at the level that they do brings a certain amount of cost to it, or they certainly feel they are trying to perform in a way that maybe doesn't feel as natural as it should. So those tend to be my people. They tend to be the arenas that I look in, but I then like to approach that with a bit of a nerdy operations brain and work together to look at scaffolding and streamlining how we work.
Mm-hmm. And you're neurodivergent as well, right?
I am, yes.
And when were you diagnosed and what brought you to seek a diagnosis?
I was diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago now. I am currently waiting for an autism assessment, as I definitely think there's autistic traits there, as did my clinician who diagnosed me with ADHD. So, yeah, 2 years now for ADHD, and we're just waiting for autism.
And what did the diagnosis do for you? Like, did make things clearer? Did give you some relief? What happened after you got your diagnosis?
I think the main thing for me is language, having language for things that I've been carrying sort of without words, actual explanations that came with science and fact rather than just emotion. I also went through, I think, what a lot of people call the relief and the grief. So relief, it's not all in my head, or it is all in my head, but it has a name. There is a reason for what is in my head, which was very immediate. But then that grief of how has it taken 38 years to get this kind of answer, to be able to understand why my brain works the way it does and why it does some things really, really well that maybe other people find hard, and the things that maybe people find easy, conversely, I find quite difficult. And that grief I had heard of, but I wasn't quite prepared for it, because then you wonder, well, what if I'd known 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I get really excited and emotional when I hear about children going for diagnosis, and emotional because I know how difficult it may be, what they're navigating, but also just really excited that they get answers at such an early age. But with most things, I'm very, very happy doing what I'm doing now. I really, really enjoy my life as it is. So maybe if I'd known things earlier, I wouldn't be doing what I am now. So things tend to sort of happen as they do, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I I want to stop for a second on the fact that you're also waiting for an assessment for the autism, right? Because that is something that I think about myself. Like the more and more, like it seems like now that I know that I have ADHD, like all the symptoms are coming even stronger, and it's probably because I'm making a conscious effort to unmask. But I had several conversations in many episodes of the podcast, and it's about the the double diagnosis, right? Like having both the ADHD and the autism at the same time, and why people want that. And that there are different reasons, right? Some for somebody it's identity. For some, like it's the opposite, like they have first the autism diagnosis, but then the ADHD might unlock for them the medication. So there are different reasons. And I wanted to ask you, what are yours?
Mine was actually autism is the first thing that I went to in terms of I know something slightly different here, and it was actually autism that I went to, and that's because I was at well, we were doing a sort of group journaling exercise, and the prompt was, "What emotion are you sitting with right now?" And this was very early in lockdown, like it was sort of early 2021, so we were in lockdown 17.0, and things were very, very difficult. There was a lot of headspace, too much headspace. Like it was a strange time, wasn't it? But I just froze and realized I couldn't name a single emotion, or I could name them, but not one that felt right, not one that was like, oh yeah, that's definitely what I feel. And I ended up Googling it. Like why Google would know what I was particularly feeling? Not a clue. But then obviously the first thing that came up is online autism quiz. And I was like, oh cool, let's do that. That's definitely what I should be doing in this thread of thought. So I did it and surprisingly tested quite high on it. And I took a screenshot of it and sent it to my friend who is actually a mental health specialist for social work, and she looked at it and she went, "Don't worry, I'm like people can score really really high on those. Like don't get in your head about it." So I was like, "Okay, right, fine." Side note, definitely think she's on the spectrum, so she's probably not in the right sort of thing to do it. But it did sort of sit with me, like it just sort of festered away in the back of my mind, and I think it was seeing um other people's lived experiences. Because up until
Mm,
that point, all I knew about autism was that it was the only depictions I'd ever seen of it was men, and it was the savant type who can draw the Eiffel Tower from memory and Rain Man type things
yeah.
and knows the decimal places of pi up until like 3000 that and I couldn't connect with that, rightly or wrongly. That is what I thought autism was. And I was like, that's not me. A, I'd never seen it in women, and B, like, as a job, I have to stand up in front of people. I have to walk into big conference halls and talk to people. They were two very, very different versions, and it just didn't make sense. And it was only when I started seeing other women a very similar age to me sharing their experiences on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, and it was just reels of the traits, not necessarily saying this is autism. It was, hey, this is a trait I have. This is what it looks like. How about you? And things started to click into place. And definitely the autism elements resonated with me. But ADHD started to come through really hard. And I was like, okay, that's another thing. Because again, the only understanding I had of ADHD was naughty boys hanging out at trees.
Yep.
And yeah, it took me a really long time to start to connect the two and to try and understand that that could be me.
Hmm. So for you, it's basically this final piece of your identity, basically. Yeah, and I second that 100% because it feels like when I got my diagnosis for ADHD, and it was, I say it was fun, but it wasn't fun. And it was a very hard moment of my life. Like, it was a very hard moment. I was in therapy, and my therapist just dropped the bomb. Like, I considered like that you might be neurodivergent. I was like, of course not. Like, almost 40. What are you talking about? And then because the algorithm is very smart, and I love the algorithm, particularly Instagram's algorithm, it started showing me, of course, all sorts of reels and posts about it. And I was like, but I do that. And I do that. And I do that too.
Tick,
And then
tick.
and you start saying, maybe? And then you start asking, to your immediate friends and like, nah, no, no, you don't. Fast forward after my diagnosis, like not only I had the combined type ADHD, but basically the way that the assessor told me, like, there is a score and you got the highest score. I was like, because I'm always the overachiever, right? Even then. So I do get it because since that moment, it felt like I had to learn about myself all over again. It's like, who is this person that has been hidden in a way inside me all of this time? And I think when you're on that journey, and particularly when you're a woman, I think it's very validating saying, yeah, it was not just all in my head. So I get it. All of that to say, I get it 100%. And the thing that I wanted to ask, and I ask many people the same question, is how were you growing up as a child?
And it feels like I'm back in my assessment. I really start to sort of go back and sort of think like, where can I see this showing up? Because there were an awful lot of times that I think that hyperactive to crashing, I can definitely see where I would go really, really hard at something and then just be completely exhausted. Just put that down to lack of energy. And I think, like a lot of women as well, have been misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression at various points in my life. But particularly when I was younger, there are two things that stand out to me. One was, and this was when I was in high school, because we had different classes and you had that sort of rotating timetable, and sometimes you can only put the pieces together when you look back, can't you? I took all my books with me every day. So I had every single textbook that I could possibly need for all of my subjects in a bag. Didn't even leave them in my locker. They were all in my bag, along with my PE kit, so that I wouldn't have forgotten them, because I'd learned enough times that I had forgotten them and got bollocked. And I was like, well, that is not an experience I enjoy. So just didn't take them out of my bag. I kept them all in my bag so that I knew they would all be in there. Some classes had like 3, 4 great big heavy textbooks. No wonder my back is in the state that it was, because I had problems with my back for years. And then when I got to university, how structured I was changed hugely, because when I was younger, my mother put all the structure in for me. I swam, I was a swimmer when I was a kid, and most of my evenings I'd be on poolside, and then obviously I was at school during the day. So I had a very regimented and structured day. I had all my stuff ready, mum made my lunch, and then I was swimming in the evening. Very, very structured. Still quite the same in high school, got a bit more laxed in college. People don't check up on you as much in college. I had free periods in college. Was I studying? Was I? Heck, I'd gone off to the pub. And that started to waver a little bit. And having had really, really good grades at GCSEs, they were pretty poor at A level. And then got to university and no one cares where you are, do they? You
Yeah.
turn up to your lessons, don't turn up to your lessons, no one's coming for you. Your lecturers would sometimes give you a bit of a talking to, but ultimately you've got to fend for yourself. I failed first year and I resit it. I nearly failed it a second time. It's amazing I came away with a degree at all, because I just wasn't used to putting my own structure in place. It completely baffled me. And having 6 months to finish an assignment didn't mean I'd done it any earlier. I still did it the day before, stayed up all night, pulled an all-nighter in the library because it was open 24/7, would go and hand it in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then just go and crash for 2 days, fall asleep because I couldn't do anything else. That I just just thought it was normal. I thought everyone did that. Quite a few people did do that, but that
Now
is
you wonder,
definitely
it's like,
deadlines.
were
Yeah.
those the people that you were naturally like drawn to? And you're like, maybe that was my tribe back then and I didn't know. No, it feels like you're telling part of my story too, because it's exactly the same. Like the structure when you grow up that all of a sudden disappear, particularly at university, and like the things done at the last minute. Like at university, I gave myself a caffeine poisoning because of the amount of caffeine that I drank in 24 hours in order to study an all nighter, which is absolutely crazy. But yeah, so I get it. I absolutely get it. And what was happening, like, beneath the surface when you failed that first year?
I think a lot happens, doesn't it, in your first year at uni? You're 18 or 19, depending on whether or not you missed a year, but you think you're very grown up. Moved away from home. There's also that, oh God, I've got to do my own washing. No one's going to clean up after me. So there's a very sort of rapid growing up. Responsibilities sort of come at you hard, but also they don't, because as I say, no one's checking up on you. No one is making sure that you do these things. No one is making sure that you have fed yourself or slept properly or had a wash. I did have a wash, by the way, I hasten to add. But I can see how certainly I did, and I can see definitely how for a lot of people it's quite discombobulating because it's a very, very, very different environment. You've got a load of teenagers all together. It just, I mean, we laughed that it was like holiday camp because we were all in the big university halls and it was great. I have friends that I met there that I'm still friends with today. Like it was a brilliant experience, but it was also it was a really lonely experience being around lots and lots of people, but also still trying to understand who you are. And I think it was the first time I realized that FOMO would hit me quite hard. There was a few periods when I first started where I couldn't sleep, and it's because there was always something going on in the hall. Our halls were massive. There were 90 students in there. There was always something happening, even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I couldn't sleep just because my brain was wanting to go and see whatever was happening because someone had decided they want to start making a cake at 4 a.m. or someone's having a party down the other end and what have you. Oh, there's a photo shoot going on. Let's go and see what's happening there. Like there's always just mad, random shit, isn't there? And it was so distracting that I found it really, really difficult. And I am not surprised I failed first year. I'm really, really not. Again, I'm amazed that I managed to pass the last time, but I think it was just such a change in rhythm routine in that there wasn't one. And I then spent about a decade putting that routine back in so that I could be successful in a career. Because if I'd carried on doing that, I would have really, really struggled.
And how did you build your successful career? Because this is the thing, like you have built it. And what did you do? And what was the cost?
I think I think if we're going to talk cost, it's probably masking is a good place to start. And you
Mm.
mentioned it earlier. And I think it is both a blessing and a curse. And that is because masking allows you to do pattern recognition. It means that you can recognize what behaviors are rewarded, what behaviors mean that you do well. And but if you think about all the things that sort of make up masking, which, and I was thinking about this the other day, because obviously it's a term that was first used for the autism community. It is now used more broadly across other neurodivergent conditions and traits, but it is socially acceptable safety because you are mimicking behaviors and rehearsing particular words or and I don't just mean like you're going to go into a presentation, so you want to rehearse it. It's learning words or jokes that allow you to look more normal and allow you to fit in and working through different sort of social interactions. It's if you stim a lot, I'm very expressive with my hands. I always move my hands around a lot when I talk. It might be that people particularly want to feel like they need to move about a lot. It's suppressing that natural stimming, which allows you to self-soothe, whether that's picking, licking, what have you. It's exhausting. It's doing extra work, isn't it? And if you think of your body as a battery, the amount of power it needs to do those tasks is immense. And that's before you even do the job. So I got very, very good at masking. And I don't think that necessarily started when I was working. It's something I learned as quite a young child. It just evolves as you get older, doesn't it? You learn how to recognize for every teacher that I have, I knew exactly what level of work I needed to do for them to be able to meet expectations so that I would get praise, or if it's something I wasn't that interested in, to at least fly under the radar so that I wasn't picked up, because there's nothing worse than them being called out in front of everyone, is it? That's the absolute goal, is to avoid that. Whereas within a career, I worked out very quickly what I liked and what I was good at, and very lucky that what I realized I was good at was coaching and managing people. But that also made me think, when I'd started my first job and I was an online advisor in a call center, I was like, I hate this. This is it's just the longest slog. I'm really bored. I want to do all these other things. And I can remember my manager at the time just going, Emma, you're going to have to figure out what's the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and work out what you need to be to change that. And and that's what I did. Learn those behaviors, learn how to step into it, learn how to become needed.
Mm.
And I mentioned my manager. I'm very, very privileged to have had some very, very good managers who developed me, who believed in me, who saw potential in me and then put me forward for things. But I'm also not daft. If something was going to happen that I didn't like, I made sure I was part of it rather than something that is happening to me. Actually, I've just thought now an example. When I was one of the coaches, we were all team coaches, and you were assigned to a team. So you were buddied up with a manager and you coached their team. And I love that. However, quite a lot of the other managers complained that maybe they weren't getting an equal quality of coaching. There were a couple, I would say myself included, that were the stronger ones, and there were some that were a bit newer, like it wasn't quite their thing. So they wanted to mix us all up so that we all coached different people, and I hated it. I thought, I don't want to do that. That sounds awful. I've built a really good relationship here. I know the people I'm working with. I know where I want to get them to. This sounds shit. But I knew it was happening. So I made sure that I did the rota. I worked out what the teams were going to be. And I said, right, I will take this off your hands, my boss, and I'll organize it. I'll make sure it's all structured, that we get a good rhythm with it. And it at least meant I was in control of it, even if it's not something that I necessarily wanted to happen.
And you mentioned that the cost was the masking, but what repercussion did it have in your personal life?
I think it varied from job to job. And as I progressed and my responsibilities became more, and I'd say my need to prove myself, to feel like I was worthy of progressing, because I'd essentially gone from online advisor to call center manager within 3 years, which was fairly unheard of at the time. I definitely felt the need to prove that I was where I was because I had earned it. I was one of the youngest. Most of the other managers were men. It was a very, very different environment. And that, first of all, felt like I need to change myself a lot here. So the Emma that feels quite fun, the Emma that feels a little bit chaotic, she's got to go because she needs to be taken seriously. So straight away, you've got that sort of, it's not just having a level of professionalism, it's almost feeling like two completely different people, because I did not believe there was any place in my professional life for the Emma that's creative, likes drawing, likes photography, all the things that felt very me, the one that likes punk music, the one that, likes going out and has probably a bit of an awkward sense of humor, but that felt sort of quite awkward and sarcastic. I felt she had no place in my professional life, and I had to keep her really, really separate and really quiet. And that started to create quite a lot of fracture in myself. It's a
Mm.
really, really strange thing to feel like you're not being yourself and that everyone has a certain opinion of you. I was called the Ice Queen, and most of my friends would go, that's not what you're like. That's not who you are. But I was always known as being quite cold and quite standoffish. And I think there were some people who were terrified of me, which is awful and definitely doesn't feel particularly authentic. But there's also a part of me that really liked that because that felt quite powerful. That felt like being taken seriously. And leaning into that made me feel like I'd earned a seat at the table. And
Mm.
most of the other women who were successful in that business and who went on to progress were known for being absolute ballbusters. They had built a reputation of ruling by fear. So again, I learned that that behavior got rewarded and that's what I lent into. But then it meant that crash out afterwards of, I'm not being myself. This feels like I have to spend ages being this version of me. The other one needs to relax. But I couldn't because you're going for 100 miles an hour a day. Because I only have two speeds. It's either at the speed of light or it is just complete potato. So for I wouldn't even say 5 days, probably 6 days of the week for a heck of a lot of hours, I was being this
Go. Yeah.
corporate hamster wheel lunatic, and I just crashed at the weekend. I did nothing for years. I had no social life. I wouldn't really go anywhere. I was just recovering, and I would play computer games, watch TV, just completely try and decompress, and I didn't have much chat. I didn't I didn't have anything to give. So imagine the strain on your relationships with your partner, with your family, with, friends that don't see you for years. Or when you do see them, it's like for a weekend and then it's like a big mental weekend because yay, we don't have to be adults anymore. I would I had no hard stop for anything. I will do anything to a very, very high level, including being a complete lunatic and dancing with my friends till 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's very difficult when you have no off switch
Yeah.
because then the recovery from that is massive. And there was a big, big change for me, and this is before diagnosis, big change for me in that I moved house, I moved job, my partner that I've been with for a very long time, we broke up. Like lots of big life events happened
Changes.
within a very, very short space of time. And it was awful at the time. Like it was really, really difficult. And I look back now and know that that was absolutely the right thing to do. It just felt really, really hard at the time. But those changes gave me a lot of time to really think about what's important to me. Then obviously we went into pandemic and lockdown and what have you, and talk about cost quite a lot. I definitely know within myself and within, I think, most of the neurodivergent community, coping mechanisms can vary dramatically with how we decompress and how we try and re-regulate ourselves. And whether it's maladaptive or adaptive, if it's something that we want to do, we want to do. The one thing that I definitely do not regret doing is stopping drinking. And I did that even before I got my diagnosis. In fact, it'll be 2 years next week. It's actually the day after my birthday. I knew that while I was waiting for the diagnosis, and I thought there's a good chance here that they're going to offer me medication, which would be great. I'd like to try that. But there is absolutely no way I would want to mix alcohol and stimulant medication. That sounds lethal. So I stopped for 30 days, I stopped for 60 days, and then I stopped for 90 days because I couldn't say at the time that that was it. I'm never going to drink again like that. That was too big. That was too much. Just did it in little increments. And now I'm so stubborn that the thought of making it go back to zero would drive me absolutely bonkers. So that is it now. But I can't imagine still drinking because it was such a helpful switch off for when your brain has been going phenomenally quick. And I think, like an awful lot of people, lockdown again exacerbated that because all of a sudden we were drinking on a Tuesday night because who knew what was going to happen? Let's open the wine. And it became way too easy to try and use alcohol to slow down my brain when it's going at a million miles an hour. So stop to that.
That is powerful, and thank you so much for sharing it, because it's very personal, and I think there is a lot related to ADHD and the excess that we go to, and that might be alcohol. For some others it might be drugs. Like, for me, it was food, for example, because that was the way for me to get the dopamine that I needed in order to kind of survive in with this thing that was constantly going on in my head, and I was always craving something that was never there. Now I get a name for it. Back then it was like, I have to try everything that is at my disposal. So thank you for sharing it. But you said something really interesting, and it's about professionalism. And with your career and also with the work that you do today, what do you think defines professionalism, or who defines it, and who does it exclude?
I think it's a really, really good question. And I think probably my definition of professionalism now would be very different to the definition that I started with and that I believed was the only way to be successful. And I think for an awful lot of us, particularly if we've been in corporate roles, it's going to have been defined by white middle class cis men, isn't it? I'm not necessarily saying there's anything wrong with that. There is a reason for that, and there is a reason that has come about. But what it doesn't allow for is then difference. So if you are female, and cycles are very different, a woman's biocycle is 28 days, a man's is 24 hours. Immediately there, you've got difference. There's different responsibilities. So as gender norms have changed, women are more likely to be in the workplace. Is the division of labour shared at home? Who's doing the school pickup? How easy is it for you to hold down a full-time job and to be as present a parent as you want to be? That starts to create friction in there. And that's before you're then going into different areas like gender, sexuality, disability. Whether or not you include neurodivergences in disability is completely up to you. I know there's a lot of different thoughts on that, but that intersectionality of difference starts to throw a lot in there. And it starts to really chip away at, well, what does professional look like? Because if you hold everything by just one standard, most people aren't going to live up to that. And I think I can't remember who said it. I think it might actually be, it's Einstein's, isn't it? That if you judged a monkey and a shark by how well they could climb a tree, one is a clear winner in there. And it doesn't necessarily mean a shark is not great at being a shark, but your standard of success becomes very, very limited if you stay in that way. And there are other different social norms in there. I think that the one that sticks out to me is eye contact. So I can remember being told at a very, very young age that if someone doesn't make eye contact with you, then they are lying. Forced eye contact is definitely masking. And even now, so I've got two screens in front of me and the camera is there. I will try as much as I can to hold eye contact with you. If we were face to face, it might be a little bit more intense for me. And I'm sorry, but for you as well, because I'd be looking at you going, no, me, I want to keep eye contact with you. But am I making too much eye contact? Am I looking at them? Which eye am I looking at? And all of a sudden, I've just become completely distracted by the fact I'm staring at someone's eyes. And what I also do is, if you ask me a question, if you ask me something and make me really think, I always look up, I look away. I can't hold eye contact and think and be really, really, because I can't do both those things at once. So I will start to look up and I'll say, oh, that's a really good question. I start looking all the way around. And if you just wanted me to hold eye contact, I will have gone completely blank. I wouldn't have had a clue, because that's not how I think. I can't do both of those things at once. But if I can sort of sit, and sometimes I'll wander about as well, and like the movement really helps. That is being allowed to work through my own process.
And it's interesting what you're saying, because I just had a conversation today about somebody asked me like my opinion about something, because there was this person that was really struggling to take notes during a meeting, and they were using their phone to record it because they realized that just with pen and paper, they couldn't hold up to that pace. But the person that they were in a meeting with called that unprofessional. And when I heard that, I was like, well, I would challenge that. Because if that means that at the end of the meeting, you have more structured meeting notes that you can actually follow, you have the actions, and that person is not overwhelmed and is not going home crashing, well, that is not unprofessional. That is actually being professional because they're putting that job in a very high respect, right? They're respecting the role, they're respecting what they're doing to the point that they're showing their weakness because let's face it, it is what it is because we live in a neurotypical world. So that becomes a weakness all of a sudden. And not only that, but why would you look at somebody that is just trying to do their job and say, oh, you're not professional? And I don't know when that was defined, but I struggle a lot with that idea. And I always think, and that is something that I've done as a manager through the years, if that person at the end of the day is delivering what I'm asking them to deliver, it doesn't matter how they get from A to B. For me, the important is that as a business, we get B. Yes, there are rules. Like, for example, I work in a very regulated environment, right? So
Mhm.
as long as those rules are followed and respected, then it doesn't matter how you get from A to B. The important thing is that we get there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I totally get it. And I also in the same breath understand why it can be difficult for businesses. And I think the key thing is what you said there. So someone had asked you, it's communication. It's being able to be transparent and to ask the awkward questions. People really, really struggle with difference and they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to make things awkward, so they don't say anything or they just judge, and that is infinitely more difficult. I think having a approach of curiosity over judgment is only ever going to be a good thing, and being able to have a conversation, because if I'd seen someone doing that in a meeting, my first thought would be, are they just playing about on their phone? But I would ask them and I'd say, can I just ask? Are you all right? Are you bored? And if someone then said, oh, no, I'm taking notes, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. But if you don't ask, and if you only then stay with well, they're just messing about on their phone, then you haven't really unearthed that. And I think that is certainly the thing I found by learning more about ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and the gang, going through my own journey of diagnosis. The first people I told were my team because they were the call I had booked in after it. They knew before my mum did. And I hadn't told them I was going for it. The only person I told was my sister because I didn't want my mum texting me on the morning saying, I hope everything goes okay. Love you, mum, but I did not need that. So I told my sister and I told her afterwards. But yeah, I was straight on with my team immediately afterwards and said, I've just been diagnosed with ADHD. And they all went, oh, congrats. And I was like, yeah. But that was such a lovely way of being able to talk to people and be really, really open with them and explain sort of what had happened. And, one of my team was already diagnosed with autism. Another, their son is nonverbal autistic. His little lad is still in primary school. So it's language that we had already been using, and I knew I was waiting for my diagnosis. And I always wanted to use quite inclusive language, but I made it a very, very deliberate choice to be front and center with it and to even acknowledge it, which is, you know, we're all sat around planning what we're going to do for the next quarter and we're all time blind. Like, let's be real. Like, this is what happens when you've got a group of mostly neurodivergent, some we're pretty sure. So I'm just going to assume that we all are because I firmly believe neurodivergent friendly practices benefit everyone. You cannot disadvantage other people by being clear, by wanting to say what is the outcome that we want to get from this, by telling everyone what the agenda is for it, by telling, by being able to follow inclusive practices, you are not excluding everyone and anyone, and that is the point. But I think the thing that was really lovely was another member of my team, and actually the youngest member of my team, she was much younger than the rest of us, had said to me privately a few weeks afterwards that because I had been so open, she had been able to both herself and in her mind come to the conclusion, actually, perhaps there's something I need to explore here, and had gone to seek her own diagnosis. And that felt bigger than the work. That was way more important, to be able to let someone see the thing that perhaps I'd never seen. That felt really good, because I think that's the thing with you. I've gone off on a mad tangent, but your original question was around
No, it's
professionalism,
perfect.
but being able to, you can't be what you can't see, can you? So when you start to see people that you recognize, that you can see yourself in, doing the thing maybe you want to do, being successful, still being able to function, but being very upfront about the fact that I'm having a bit of a difficult day because we've done 3 days of conferencing or of planning and what have you. And it was really good and I loved it and it was really intensive, but I don't want to speak to anyone today. So if we're all just, we're going to have no meetings, we're going to clear it all out. And I think just that permission to advocate for what you need, for what works, and not in the way that is, I'm going to have to do it this way and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about it, but more of a collaborative that, to get the best out of me and out of everyone, this might be a good idea. And I think that approach for individuals and for businesses, because we've all got to come to the table on this, I think that would go a long way.
Yeah. And in your experience, what do you think people most misunderstand about high performing neurodivergent professionals?
I think the first is the cost. As we said with masking, that effort drain, whatever you want to call it, energy, effort, performance in itself. Just imagine if you have got someone in your team or in your family, however, if it's you and you are needing to exert that much of energy to just get to a baseline, and whether that is pretending that the environment you're in is not driving you absolutely bonkers because it's too hot, it's too loud, it's too bright, then that is exhausting. And the same with having to keep onto the social norms and what have you. Just think how much, if you've got a high performer who's needing to do that, just think how much better their performance would be if they weren't having to waste their energy on that. So I think that first, absolute shed load of effort you have to put into just appearing normal and together. And I think the other thing is how much they are probably in their own head about it. In their own head is probably the best way of describing it, because it's so internal. And for the same reason that so many of us were missed, we were not diagnosed. That number is much higher in women, but there are still plenty of men that are late diagnosed. And, I was 38. How many are still diagnosed? 38, 48, 58, 68. Here are people diagnosed into 70 and beyond. And that is because it's not something you can see. It is not something that is a visible condition. And because of that, it can fly under the radar for so long. And I think even that diagnostic process in itself is really, really difficult, because actually the official diagnostic criteria says that you need to be struggling in 2 areas of your life. And GPs don't specialize in this. And I know of quite a few people who their GP told them that it was not worth progressing with a diagnosis because they had a degree, they had a job, they had a good job. You're successful in what you do. Being successful, and whatever your version of success is, and it can vary hugely for other people, doesn't mean that it is not, I was going to say difficult. And I want to be really careful with that, because I'm not saying that being successful is an easy thing to do, but it is the hidden cost that you cannot see. And it is all those other things around masking and around not feeling like you can be yourself and not feeling like you can advocate for yourself and say, you know what, actually, if I could do it this way, this way, this way, or maybe if I could have the information in this way, I could give you so much more. And I think the fact that I know people still can't do that makes me very sad, because it shouldn't be that way. So if you have ever been told, or if you have ever said to someone, you're ADHD, autistic, dyslexic, you don't look it. Well, of course we don't look it. But also, I wouldn't know because of X, Y, and Z. You're not in tons of debt. You've actually managed to hold down a relationship. You can own a house. Okay, great. But I've been exhausted for decades. So thanks.
Yeah. So now I feel a failure too because I'm not struggling enough for you to see it. Thank you. I needed that. No,
Yeah, I think that the not struggling enough is the real thing, because if you can do it once, then why can't you do it again? No, of course, that is what I tell myself every day. I gone for a 4-mile walk this morning. I 100% think I can do it every day. Why wouldn't I be able to? Sometimes you just can't, and then beating yourself up about it doesn't help anybody. It really, really doesn't. Yeah, I definitely that thing of, if you can do it, why can't you continue to do it? And I'd counter that with, how many people, if you have ADHD, if you are ADHD yourself, how many times have you done 3 days work in a day and then like, don't make conversation with me for a little bit. That is it. And that irregularity there's shame in that. Like, why can I not do this all the time? Well, you can't, because you're not a robot. Like, that's not how it works. But that's very, very difficult to be able to tell someone, actually, now that I've done this, I need to not do things for a while, because again, I don't think this is specific to neurodivergent people, but we have got so used to just being constantly at sprint, and humans aren't built for that, to just be constantly going. That is why people are burning out at record rates. Definitely think it is exacerbated if you're neurodivergent, but it is not exclusive to neurodivergent brains to burn out. And that is because of the gap between expectation and reality, and what it takes to have to try and stay at that point.
And what do you do these days to regulate?
I'm really nerdy about this. I have a sort of suite of these things, a bit of a regulation sort of dopamine reset menu. So I have my regular and often, which is when I go to the gym, go for a walk, and then other things that I will rotate in. Sometimes it is playing computer games, sometimes it is reading a book, and then some like more quick things that I can do in 5 minutes, like just listen to a favorite song, just sit and do box breathing for a minute or two. Now that it's not chucking it down, go outside for a minute, have a cup of tea, just not answering emails, not doing other things, just sit and drink. And I think having a variation of things is very, very helpful. Because again, we do a routine once and we're like, this is it, this is going to be brilliant, like this is what I have to do. I've now got my 3-hour morning routine down. And the next day, when you invariably don't do it and then feel like a failure, like, this is it.
Yeah, no, and that is it for everything, and it goes from like your skin routine, yeah, right? Your skincare, like you have it, it's perfect, it's amazing. I have it written down in like in my bathroom cupboard where all my cosmetics are, and it's like it's there. I will see it. I will do it every day. Think again. Sometimes I forget for weeks, and then I go back to it, but yeah, we learn to live with the ups and downs of how our brain works.
I have an alarm for my skincare routine, because if I leave it too late, there are two things that I absolutely cannot do when I'm tired. One is make the bed, and the other is wash my face. And they are just, I will do anything to avoid it. There's nothing more frustrating, is there, than when you're tired than coming back to your bed and realizing it's not made. Like, I would rather set fire to it than have to make that bed. I just, no. And now I have an alarm that goes off. I've got a couple of the little Google speakers. I've got one in here and I've got one downstairs that at 8 p.m. in the evening goes, executive function reminder, it's time to wash your face. And my partner thinks it's hilarious. If I'm upstairs, he'll just go, your executive face wash has gone off. And I was like, right, okay, I better go and do it. Because if I leave it any later, if it's gone 8:30, getting on to 9 o'clock, I will do anything to avoid doing that. Anything. He'll come upstairs and he'll be like, why are you rearranging the back bedroom? And I was like, have you washed your face? No, no.
No, no, it's okay. I prefer to die and rot here.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
fine.
No, I'm going to do my MVP, and that's the other thing. I'm like, right, I'm just going to do one step of it. And actually, once I've done one step, I'm like, oh, well, I may as well do the rest now. So just just doing one small step, I find invariably is the very best place to start, or whatever. Julie Andrews.
I have one last question for you. And that is, what would you want listeners to take away from your story?
Think if something that used to work doesn't work anymore, you're not broken, you're not failing, but it just means that that system, routine, scenario needs updating. Something needs to change. And give yourself a bit of grace with that, because that's okay. Things work until they don't, and beating yourself up about it isn't helpful. I think the biggest thing that came with late diagnosis for me was self-acceptance and understanding yourself at whatever age. And actually, really, I don't think it's got a timeline. I don't think it's got, there is no end point to that. You can suddenly wake up tomorrow and decide you want to do something completely different. Heck, I did. Like, I've taken the skills that I had in a corporate role, but now I'm doing something different that that really fulfills me. And that doesn't mean I don't enjoy what I did. I absolutely love what I can move into now. And there would have been a part of me going, you can't do that. That's not done. That's not allowed. And I would always ask you to challenge what that thinking is, because if it's not serving you, why would you listen to it? Who benefits from it if you do? So definitely look at the settings, the structures, the things around you that, if they're not telling you that what you are doing is right, Marie Kondo them. If it does not bring you joy, get rid of it, or at least have a good look at it and decide how important it is to keep hold of it. Because that version of you that that unmasks and can feel comfortable doing so, that's where the real stuff happens. And it feels awkward as heck to start with. And that's all right. We like awkward.
Oh, yes, we do. We very much do. Thank you so much. Like, it's been a fantastic conversation, one that I really, really liked. And thank you so much for being so honest and open. Like, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
The Spacious Brain podcast will come back soon with a new episode and new stories to share. So stay tuned and follow me now, before you forget.